At 13, I was abandoned, left alone on the streets with nothing but a suitcase and the shattered remains of my family's love. My parents told me I wasn't worth their time. They didn't even look back as they drove away. I remember standing there, watching their car disappear into the distance, my heart sinking with every passing second. I had to survive, had to make it on my own, but they never thought I would. Fast forward 15 years, one day, I'm sitting in my office, my phone rings, it's my mom. I can't even describe the feeling. After all this time, after all those years of silence, now they're calling me? They say they need my help, my father's sick, they're desperate. They don't know what they're asking for, they have no idea who I've become, or how far I've come. I'd built a life that they could never have imagined, a life without them. They used to call me worthless, they used to say I'd never amount to anything. Now, the tables have turned, and it's their turn to beg. But me? I'm not the same person anymore. I've learned that family doesn't just mean blood, it's about who sticks by your side when you need it the most. So when they showed up on my doorstep, thinking I'd just forgive them, I had to remind them of something. I'm not the one who needs saving anymore, I said. And I meant every word. They called me, expecting me to drop everything, to rush to their side like I always did in the past, but this time, I wasn't the same person anymore. My heart no longer twisted at the thought of them. I had built something, a life that didn't revolve around their approval or their rejection. I had learned the hard way that survival wasn't just about breathing, it was about standing tall, even when the world, especially your family, told you that you didn't matter. I sat there, looking at my phone, hearing my mother's voice on the other end, shaking as she asked for help. I could hear the desperation in her words, but all I could feel was, nothing. The years of abandonment, the moments when I cried myself to sleep wondering why they didn't love me, all seemed like a distant memory now. I didn't need them. I had learned to survive. Without them, had to. When they left me behind, they never thought I would stand up for myself, let alone succeed. But I did. I built my own life, brick by brick, job by job. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. When I opened my door to them that day, it wasn't just to hear their apologies. I wanted them to see me, to finally recognize who I had become. And yet, there they were, standing on the doorstep, looking like strangers, not even knowing what they had done to me. They were the ones who needed me now, not the other way around. My father, with his frail voice, trying to guilt-trip me into helping him, my mother, her tears almost too late to win me over. But here's the thing. I wasn't that scared 13-year-old girl anymore. I had earned every bit of the life I had. I wasn't going to give it all up just to fix their mistakes. I let them stand there in silence, waiting for me to speak. The years of pain, of being treated like I was invisible, it all came rushing back, but I wasn't the same anymore. I had learned my worth. I wasn't their punching bag anymore. Finally, I spoke. I'm not the one who needs saving anymore, I said. And I meant it. There was no going back, no more playing their game. The tables had turned, and for the first time in my life, I was the one in control. I told them I couldn't help them, that they had made their choices long ago, and now, they would have to live with them. They begged, but I wasn't moved by their pleas anymore. I had walked away from them once, and I had found a way to stand on my own. Now, it was their turn to feel the consequences of their actions. The sound of their footsteps fading as they walked away was all the closure I needed. I didn't need their apology. I didn't need their love. I had learned that I could live without it, and I would be just fine. The days after they left me felt like they would never end. I had nothing, no family, no friends, just a suitcase and a broken heart. But somehow, I survived. The world didn't stop spinning when they walked away, and neither did I. It was tough. Harder than I ever imagined, but slowly, step by step, I rebuilt my life. I found work, moved into a small apartment, and learned to fend for myself. The nights were the hardest, of course. The silence, the empty space in my bed, the sound of my own breathing in a world that had forgotten me. I didn't know if they even thought of me, but I couldn't afford to dwell on it. I had to keep moving forward, because that's what they never taught me, how to give up. The first few years were a blur of struggle and survival. I never asked for help. I never reached out. I didn't trust anyone enough to let them in. I told myself I didn't need anyone, I could do it alone, and I did. The only people I needed were the ones who weren't afraid to let me stand on my own 2 feet. Slowly, I started building my career. It wasn't easy. There were nights I stayed up late working on projects that seemed impossible. There were days I barely had enough to pay rent, but I pushed through. I had to. They hadn't given me a choice. But somehow, something inside me had changed. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was living. I wasn't that 13-year-old girl begging for love and attention. I was a woman who had learned to stand up for herself. And as I grew stronger, something else grew too, my confidence. People started to notice. The phone calls began to come in. Offers, opportunities, doors that had once been closed to me began to open. I realized I didn't need their approval, I didn't need their validation. I had done it all without them. But still, whenever I saw something that reminded me of them, it hit. The memories, of the house I used to live in, of my childhood, so many things that were wrapped in their absence. They didn't know what they had lost when they pushed me away. They never saw it, not even when I started succeeding. They never cared. They never even bothered to check on me. And that hurt, more than they could ever imagine. Then came the day when they showed up at my door. I wasn't expecting them, not in a million years. They had no idea that 15 years had passed since they left me, and in that time I had changed. I had become someone they didn't recognize. They were desperate. I could hear the panic in their voices, the fear. They needed help, they said. But the thing is, they weren't the ones who had a right to ask for it. I had spent years not knowing where they were, living in the dark, but now, they were standing in front of me, asking for something. They had no idea that I had already moved on, that I had already built my own life. A life that didn't need them. A life that had thrived despite them. As I stood there, looking at them, I couldn't help but feel a rush of power, a feeling I hadn't had in so long. They were the ones who had abandoned me. They were the ones who had walked away, and now, they were the ones begging for my help. The tables had turned, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like I was invisible. I didn't feel like I was nothing. I had become something. And they would never be able to take that away from me. I looked at them, and I smiled. "I'm sorry," I said, "but I can't help you. Not now, not ever." Their faces fell, and in that moment, I realized I didn't need them anymore. I didn't need their approval, their love, or their apology. I had learned to stand on my own, and I would never go back to being the person they thought I was. The silence that followed spoke louder than anything they could say. I had walked away from them once, and now, I was walking away from them again, on my own terms. It had been a week since they showed up at my door, and things were still spinning in my head. I had expected them to leave and never come back, but I never expected the aftermath to feel like this. The silence between us stretched for days, and yet, the weight of it all, what they had done, what they expected from me, still haunted me. I went back to my routine, the one I had worked so hard to build, but the feeling of their betrayal lingered in the background, like a shadow I couldn't shake. They hadn't just abandoned me, they had abandoned every part of me that they didn't see as valuable. They thought I was weak, they thought I would crumble without them, but I had proven them wrong. I had risen from nothing, from being the invisible child in the family to building a life that mattered. They had no idea how much they had underestimated me. But it wasn't just about proving them wrong anymore. I had realized something during that visit, something I hadn't fully understood before. It wasn't just their betrayal that hurt, it was the fact that I had allowed them to define me for so long. That day, when I told them I couldn't help them, it wasn't just about me not wanting to get involved. It was about me choosing to protect myself, choosing not to go back to that place, that child who would do anything to earn their love. It was about me finally taking control of my own life, and realizing I didn't need them anymore. As time passed, I could feel the pieces of my past slipping away. I had stopped looking over my shoulder, stopped wondering if they were thinking of me, but the phone calls came, the messages, all asking the same thing. "Can we talk?" they would say, as if time could erase what they had done. I didn't respond. I couldn't. They had their chance, and now, they had to live with it. I had a business to run, a future to build, and I couldn't afford to let them drag me back into the past. But even with all my strength, there was something that kept me up at night, a question I kept asking myself, even though I knew the answer. Did I want them back in my life? Was there a part of me that still longed for the family I once had, the one that had torn itself apart? I thought about that question for days, and then I realized something crucial. Wanting them back didn't mean I was weak. It meant I was human. It didn't mean I would let them hurt me again, it meant I could acknowledge the loss, the grief, and still walk away. There was nothing wrong with feeling that way. I wasn't betraying myself by accepting that I had once wanted them, but that time was over. I wasn't going to let them destroy what I had worked so hard to build. I had found my strength, and now it was time to protect it. So, I kept moving forward, one step at a time. And each step, each day without them, felt a little bit more freeing. Until the day came when I saw them again, not on my doorstep, but in a place that took me by surprise. I was attending a charity event, one I had been invited to, surrounded by people who admired the work I had done. And there, across the room, I saw them. They were sitting at a table, looking just as lost as they had the day they walked away from me. Their faces, now older, more worn than I remembered. My heart didn't race when I saw them. It didn't ache. Instead, I felt nothing. They saw me too, and for a moment, our eyes met. I didn't see any apology in their eyes, no recognition of what they had done to me. But I didn't need it anymore. I had found peace in the silence. I had found peace in the fact that I had survived, that I had thrived, without them. I wasn't that scared girl anymore. I wasn't the one who needed saving. I had saved myself. And when I turned my back and walked away from them, it wasn't out of anger, it was out of liberation. I had let go. I had forgiven myself, and that was all that mattered. It had been months since I saw them that night at the charity event. Life had continued on, the world had kept spinning, and so had I. But even as I kept my distance, there were moments when the past crept back into my mind, uninvited. Late at night, when I lay in bed, I sometimes thought about the people I had once called family, the people who had walked away and left me behind. But those thoughts were fleeting now, just like the shadow of a bad dream fading with the morning light. I had moved on. I had built my life on my own, without them, without anyone's help. I had achieved things I once thought were impossible. But there were still days, moments, when I found myself wondering if I had made the right choice. Was it really worth it to cut them out completely? Was I just being too proud, too stubborn to forgive? I didn't know the answer, but one thing I was sure of, I was never going back. I had learned something powerful in the years I spent without them, I didn't need them to be whole. The family I had lost was not the family I needed. The family I had now was built on respect, trust, and understanding. They weren't perfect, but they were real. They didn't expect me to change for them. They accepted me for who I was. And that was everything. But life, as it always does, threw me another curveball. One morning, as I walked into my office, I saw an envelope on my desk. The handwriting was unmistakable, it was from my father. My heart stopped for a second. I hadn't seen a letter from him in years, and I wasn't sure I was ready to read it. But the curiosity was too strong, so I opened it. "I know you may never forgive me for what I did," it started, "but I hope you'll hear me out. Your mother and I have realized something, we were wrong. We failed you, and we've paid for it every day since. We are not asking for your forgiveness, just for a chance to make things right. Please, if you can, meet us. We need to talk." I sat there for a long time, just staring at the letter. I had never thought I would hear those words. We were wrong. It felt surreal, like a dream I couldn't wake up from. And yet, even as my emotions surged inside, I knew one thing for sure: this wasn't a decision I could make lightly. I hadn't gotten to where I was by being impulsive, by letting my emotions rule my choices. I had spent years building my life, my career, my peace. And I wasn't about to let a simple letter from the past destroy everything I had worked for. But as I thought about it more, something else hit me. Maybe this was what I had been waiting for all along. Maybe the answer wasn't about whether I should forgive them, it was about whether I could forgive myself. I had spent so many years angry at them for abandoning me, but in doing so, I had also abandoned parts of myself. The child who had begged for their love, the person who had allowed their rejection to define her. I couldn't change what had happened, but I could change how I moved forward. I wasn't doing this for them. I was doing it for me. So I called them. I agreed to meet them. The next day, I drove to the small cafe where we agreed to meet. My heart raced as I walked inside. I didn't know what to expect, but I knew this was a moment of reckoning, for all of us. They were already sitting at a table when I arrived. My mother's eyes were red, as if she had been crying, and my father looked tired. It had been years since I had seen them like this. They were older now, the lines on their faces more pronounced. My mother stood up as I approached, her hands trembling. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, "for everything." My father didn't speak at first, but his eyes told me everything I needed to know. They were filled with regret. We sat down, and for the first time in years, we spoke. I didn't know where to begin, so I just said what had been on my mind for so long. "You left me. You abandoned me. I was just a kid, and you walked away." The words felt heavy in my mouth, but I needed them to be said. They listened, their heads bowed in shame. But instead of feeling the anger I once had, I felt something else. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was understanding. I understood that people made mistakes. People were flawed. They had hurt me, yes, but I had hurt myself too, by holding on to that anger for so long. The conversation didn't end with a grand gesture of reconciliation. It wasn't a movie moment, where we all hugged and cried, promising to be one big happy family. But it was a start. We didn't leave the cafe as a perfect family, but we left with a sense of peace, a sense of closure. I didn't know what the future would hold, but I knew one thing for sure: I had the power to decide what part they would play in it. I had taken control of my own life, and no matter what happened next, I knew I had made the right choice for me. The days after our meeting felt different, not better, not worse, just different. I had expected a wave of relief, some moment where everything would click back into place. But instead, all I felt was numb. It was as if the weight of everything I had been through, those years of being abandoned, those years of proving myself, was finally catching up to me. My parents were still the same. They hadn't changed. They still thought they could waltz back into my life as if nothing had happened, as if they had a right to be there. But I wasn't the same person anymore. I had spent so long in the dark, surviving on my own, that I didn't know how to let them back in. It wasn't about forgiveness, it was about boundaries. About recognizing that what they had taken from me wasn't something I could just give back because they said sorry. I didn't owe them anything. Not anymore. But the strangest part was that I wasn't angry. I wasn't bitter. I had let go of all that, or so I thought. Weeks passed, and life continued, like the rhythm of a song you can't get out of your head. The work was steady, my friendships were growing, and my business, well, it was flourishing. But then one evening, I received a call I wasn't expecting. It was from my mother. Her voice, shaky, filled with an unfamiliar vulnerability, barely recognizable. "We need you," she said. "Your father, he's in the hospital." The words hit me harder than I expected. Hospital, a word that can mean so many things, but in this case, it meant fear. It meant helplessness. It meant something I couldn't ignore. I told myself I wouldn't go, that I was done with them, but something inside me changed. The child in me, the one who had been abandoned, who had been desperate for love, that child was still in there, buried beneath all the walls I had built. And for a moment, I felt her rise to the surface. The moment I stepped into that hospital room, I saw him. My father. He was weak, pale, hooked up to machines that made the room feel cold, sterile, distant. He looked small. Not the man I had once feared, not the man who had abandoned me, but a man who was simply human. I stood there for what felt like an eternity, unsure of what to do, unsure of what to feel. My mother, standing by his side, barely looked up. She had the same expression I had seen so many years ago, empty. "I'm sorry," my father muttered, barely able to speak. "I never meant for things to end up like this." I didn't know what to say. The words didn't come. Part of me wanted to tell him everything I had felt over the years, the pain, the anger, the longing for a family that would never be there. But I didn't. Instead, I just nodded, as if acknowledging that he wasn't the man who had hurt me anymore. He was just a man. A man who, like all of us, had his flaws, his regrets, and now, his mortality. It was a moment of clarity, one that made me realize I wasn't holding on to them anymore. I wasn't holding on to the pain they had caused. The past wasn't something I could change, but the future? That was mine to shape. And so, I stayed. Not because I felt obligated, not because I wanted something from them, but because, for the first time in my life, I could let go of the bitterness. I could let go of the need to prove I was okay. I was okay. I had been okay for a long time. But this was closure. A chance to finally heal. A chance to see them, not as parents who had abandoned me, but as people who had made mistakes, just like I had. The next few days were quiet. I stayed by his side, not out of duty, but out of understanding. I watched my mother, whose face softened just a little, as if she, too, was beginning to realize the truth. We didn't speak much. Words weren't necessary. I had forgiven them long before I walked into that room. And as I stood there, watching the machines beep softly, I understood something profound. I wasn't defined by their mistakes. I wasn't defined by my past. I was defined by how I chose to live now, and that was the most powerful thing I had learned. The hospital visit wasn't the end of our story, but it was a new beginning. Not for them, not for me, but for the person I had become. The person who no longer needed their approval. The person who had finally healed. And as I walked out of that room, my steps were steady. My heart was light. Because, at last, I was free. It had been a few months since that visit, and while things were different, they weren't perfect. I had learned to let go of the past, to forgive, not for them, but for myself. The weight of it all felt lighter, but there were still moments when I found myself caught between what I had done and what I could have done differently. I was living my life, moving forward with my business and my new sense of self. Yet, every now and then, the question would linger in the back of my mind, was I doing the right thing? Was it enough? But life had a funny way of showing me that sometimes, the right thing wasn't always clear-cut. One evening, my phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number, but I answered anyway. "Hello?" I said. The voice on the other end was familiar, but much more fragile than I remembered. It was my mother. "Can we talk?" she asked. Her voice cracked, and I could hear the tremor in her words. I paused for a moment. I had thought we were past this. I had thought that chapter of my life had closed. But as she spoke, I could hear the regret in her tone, the sorrow that had built up over the years. "We need to apologize," she said. "We need to fix this, please." The words weren't easy to hear. It wasn't about forgiveness this time. It wasn't even about them needing me. It was about them finally recognizing the weight of their actions, and realizing how deeply they had hurt me. "I don't know if I can fix this," I replied, my voice softer than I had expected. You left me once. And I don't know if I'm ready to let you back in. There was a long pause. It felt like an eternity, and for a moment, I wondered if I had made a mistake by even picking up the phone. But then she spoke again, her words more measured. I understand, she said, but I just want you to know that we're sorry. We've been living with this guilt for so long, and we never really realized how much it hurt you. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to scream at her, to ask why they had never tried harder, why they hadn't shown up when I needed them most. But another part of me, perhaps the part one had spent so long protecting, wanted to believe her. To believe that people could change. To believe that, maybe, there was still a chance for us. I don't know if I can do that, I whispered, but I need time. I need to heal on my own terms. We talked for a while longer, and when the call ended, I sat there, feeling a strange sense of calm wash over me. It wasn't about accepting their apology, it was about accepting that I had the right to decide when and if they would be a part of my life again. And that decision was mine. The next few weeks were filled with more reflection, more moments of questioning. Should I forgive them? Should I let them back in? I wasn't sure. But I knew one thing for sure, whatever I decided, it wouldn't change the fact that I had already built the life I wanted. I wasn't dependent on them anymore. I wasn't waiting for their approval. I had learned to thrive on my own. And that realization brought me peace. I didn't need to rush into anything. I didn't need to make any decisions that I wasn't ready for. And then, one day, I found myself standing in front of my parents' house. The house that had once been a symbol of everything I had lost. The house that had once represented the place where I had felt abandoned and forgotten. But this time, it felt different. I wasn't standing there as the child who had been left behind. I was standing there as a woman who had taken control of her life. The door opened, and there they were, standing in front of me. My mother's eyes were red, and my father's face was lined with years of regret. They didn't say anything at first. They just stood there, waiting for me to speak. I'm here, I said, my voice steady, but I'm not sure where we go from here. My mother stepped forward, her voice shaky. We've made so many mistakes, she said, and we can never undo them. But we want to try. We want to be a part of your life, if you'll let us. I looked at them, really looked at them, and for the first time in a long time. I didn't feel that old rush of anger or bitterness. I didn't feel the need to reject them. Instead, I just nodded. I'm willing to try, I said quietly. It wasn't a promise, and it wasn't a guarantee. But it was a start. It was a step toward healing. And that was enough. I didn't need to forgive them right away. I didn't need to pretend everything was perfect. But I could choose to open the door, even just a little. And that was all I needed to do, for now. It had been a few weeks since I'd agreed to meet my parents again, and every day felt like a balancing act between what I had built for myself and what they wanted me to be. We had spoken a few times since that day they opened the door, trying to bridge the gap between us. It wasn't easy, but for the first time in years, it felt like we were trying. I wasn't sure where it was all going, but I knew one thing, there was no turning back now. The door had opened, but it wasn't just for them. It was for me, too. I could still feel the weight of the decision I had made, but there was a part of me that wondered if I had been too quick to let them back in. Could I really build a new relationship with them, after everything that had happened? I had spent so many years telling myself that I didn't need them, that I didn't want them. But the truth was, I had always longed for some kind of reconciliation, some way to repair the damage they had done to me. The more we talked, the more I realized that forgiveness wasn't as simple as saying I forgive you. It wasn't about erasing the past. It was about choosing to move forward. But moving forward was harder than I had imagined. One afternoon, I met my mother for coffee. She looked tired, but there was a softness in her eyes that I hadn't seen before. How are you? She asked, her voice cautious, like she was afraid of hearing the wrong answer. I smiled faintly, feeling the weight of the years that had passed. I'm doing okay, I said, better than I thought I would. She nodded, but her eyes betrayed her, there was still so much pain there. I want to make it right, she said quietly. I don't know if I can, but I want to try. I stared at her for a long moment, wondering if I should say what was on my mind. Do you even know what making it right looks like? I asked, my voice steady but heavy with the unspoken question. She hesitated, looking away, as if the answer was something she couldn't face. I don't, she admitted. But I want to, start somewhere.